Welcome to the Underdog Sniper Podcast. I am your host, MGCovers. This is episode 32. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. If you're watching this live on YouTube, big shout out to all my subscribers and followers there. Also, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, greatly appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen to this podcast. A lot to cover this week. We're going to go ahead and go through the outline. We're going to talk about NCAA football, Unexplained, House Edge. We were a victim of Unexplained House Edge this weekend. We're going to talk about NFL. Didn't wager yesterday, took a day off, but we will talk about that concept that I mentioned last week's podcast. We're going to talk about soccer. I'm going to make a change for soccer. We're going to talk about why that current model didn't work, albeit it's basically even right now. And then finally, we're going to wrap it up. I might talk about this when I talk about NCAA football, but we're going to talk about tilt. It's generally a term associated with poker, but there's also some parallels, and it's starting to get some traction and become a popular term in sports betting. We'll talk about what it is and how to deal with it. All right, so let's dive into NCAA, and let me pull up the betting log here for NCAA football. Okay, now, if you look, this is what we had. This was our first losing week NCAA football. Still having a really good year. We are 29-25, up 4.4 units. We'd gotten it almost to 10 units. And of course, a losing weekend this weekend obviously regressed some, still at 54%. But I want to talk about these brutal bad beats we had. All right, so we had Central Michigan, Eastern Michigan, Texas Tech, UCF, Vanderbilt, New Mexico, Arkansas State. Those are the plays overall. All right, Texas Tech, we played Texas Tech Moneyline, plus 180. I think they were plus 5.5. We played them on the money line. Generally, if it's under 7, we like to play it on the money line. And as you know, teams that win in college football, teams that cover in college football win outright 70% of the time. So it's advantageous to play on the money line. And that's pretty much true for all sports, especially if that line's relatively small. Texas Tech was winning this game 34-13 in the third quarter. There were, I think, 11 minutes to go. I think that's right. Or maybe that was early. Nonetheless, they were winning 34-13, never scored again. TCU scored 3 unanswered touchdowns, lost that one. Brutal bad beat. Now, this really wasn't a bad beat, but we did have an opportunity to win it. Eastern Michigan, they had to come from behind against Akron. They were winning 21-18 at 77 minutes and 41 seconds to go in the fourth quarter, but lost that one. We had, obviously, Eastern Michigan -2. And this was another brutal one. Arkansas State, we were winning. Arkansas State was winning 23-0. With 2 seconds remaining in half. I think I forgot the team they were playing, got a late, Troy got a late field goal before to end the half. So it was like 23-3 at halftime. So clearly covering that one. Arkansas State won. Troy made a huge comeback, but ended up losing that one. Now, if you back up to the previous day, we had a soccer play in the Columbia League. We were winning 1-0 and got a red card, lost in the 90th minute of that match, which realistic odds on that one, we probably had, for a team to score a goal in the 90th minute, it's probably maybe a 5%. So we had a 95% chance to win that one, lost. And I would say Texas Tech, I actually showed those odds. If you go to ESPN Gamecast, they do a pretty good job. If you want to see, you can see it in real time, and you can also look at it in retrospect. If you go to Gamecast, it shows you the actual odds, and it's very similar to what you would see at the sports books when they're creating live odds. So Texas Tech, we had about a 95% chance of winning that one. Arkansas State, same deal, is well over 90% chance of winning that one. So we had 3 of those 4 games. I really don't count Eastern Michigan as a bad beat, but all 3 of those were definitely bad beats. And y'all heard me talk about the term unexplained house edge. And it's extremely frustrating, and there's no way to justify it, and I'll briefly review it. Unexplained house edge means that the house will win more games like that than you will win. Not necessarily, and there are bad beats, but meaning like miracle comebacks, things like that. Like, for example, if you had Chicago yesterday, you should have covered that game in the NFL. But statistically, it doesn't make sense because if you're, especially now, it would make sense for the average bettor because the average sports bettor, 95% of the people that are involved in sports betting lose long term. So if you have more losses than wins, obviously you're going to have more bad beats. But for a winning handicapper like myself, if we have a bigger sample of wins than losses, technically, statistically speaking, we should actually have more winning, quote, bad beats. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. And there's no way to statistically justify it. That's why I've come up with and coined the term unexplained house edge. It's very difficult to deal with, which let's go ahead and talk about tilt. So after that day, I was like extremely frustrated. And again, all those were really good wagers. Like I said, we should have won those. And what was fascinating, if you look at, we're still on this page here. Take a look down here at the bottom. If we would have won Texas Tech, that would have gotten us 1.8 units. Arkansas State would have been 1 unit. We would have won. This is how close you are in this business. We would have only been down minus 0.5 units because that Texas Tech basically almost counted as 2 wins. But instead, going 1-6 got us down minus 5.6 units. So that was like so close. And of course, that bad beat from Friday night hurt us as well. But yeah, unexplained house edge is a real thing. And then for me, it wasn't, I don't think I was mad, but I think I definitely hit something that we call tilt, which we'll dive into now. And tilt is generally a sports betting term, and it's important to know about this. And let's read this definition from Wiki. It says tilt is a poker term for a state of mental or emotional confusion or frustration. Great definition, because that was the case with me, in which a player adopts a suboptimal strategy, usually resulting in the player becoming overly aggressive. Tilting is closely associated with another term, steam. I don't think so in the sports betting community. It means something different. Placing an opponent on tilt or dealing with being on tilt oneself is an important aspect of poker. It is a relatively frequent occurrence due to frustration, animosity against other players, or simply bad luck. So it says, look down here a little bit further, common causes of tilt. The most common cause of tilt is losing, especially being defeated in a particular public and humiliating fashion. In poker, a bad beat can upset the mental equilibrium essential for optimal poker judgment, causing frustration. Another common cause of tilt is bad manners from other players, causing frustration, which eventually leads to tilting. Now, basically, my definition of tilting in sports betting is when you just become frustrated. And generally, it is due to, like, I can take a loss. There's no doubt about taking a loss, but the unexplained house edge is something that is mentally frustrating because you can't statistically justify it. So a lot of ways that I combat this in the past, I would struggle with this, but a lot of times what I do is instead of worrying about it, I'll go to work on the business. Maybe I'll work on a new model. Maybe I'll work on, when I had clients teaching the stat model program, I would dive into that, work more on that. So, but sometimes the best solution is to simply take a day off. And for me, that was why I took off on Sunday, just to kind of recalibrate. And for me, I can't take off more than maybe 1 day in the business, because then I always have this desire. And even on like normal losing days, I wake up the next day, I'm ready. I want to dive into the business, excited to see the lines for that day. But I think for a majority of people, there's nothing wrong with admitting like, hey, I'm in a tilt state. I'm extremely frustrated, and taking that day off generally sort of recalibrates your mind. And think about it from this way: you're not going to you won't lose money on a tilt day. Meaning, like, if you take the day off, there's a ton of games today. There's going to be a ton of games on Tuesday. There'll be a ton of games on Wednesday. There'll be a huge slate of college football games on Saturday, huge slate of football games on Sunday. So you don't miss out. And for some people, like, I took a day off and I feel refreshed coming in today. I actually worked on soccer some yesterday, but didn't wager. So you don't have that. So you just take that off the plate completely. But for a lot of people, you might even like get to a point where taking a whole week off might be good, especially if you're like a casual sports bettor or you're doing this part-time. A lot of times that's a better approach, is taking a week off. Or I got a couple of emails this week about this, like how to get started. This particular, maybe it's just, I can't remember. the exact question, but he had very limited bankroll, was trying to figure out how to do the business. And I told him, I was like, hey, just take the pressure off of trying to wager and trying to turn a profit on a limited amount of bankroll. Just do ghost wagers. So if you go through some type of you're experiencing tilt and you still want to feel like you were, quote, working the business, you could just do ghost wagers where it doesn't cost you real money, because when you're actually losing like real dollars, I think that plays into the tilt, which they didn't talk about in this as well. So if you're ghost wagering and you're losing, it's not really, sorry about that. If you're ghost wagering, it just doesn't really, it just doesn't hurt you. So that's another suggestion in dealing with tilt. So tilt's a real thing. And when you feel like you've reached that point, I think it's best to just, stop wagering, take a day off or take a week off. All right, so let's dive into soccer. I want to show you this. This is really fascinating. All right, so I'm pulling up the soccer log here, year to date for soccer, or basically when we wagered some early in the year and was up, and then basically lost it all and got to even. And then with this new bottle, started wagering again. See, look, this is 5-5 minus 1.55 units. Now, the way that I teach this business overall, if you're even, and this could be if you're 20-20 or if you're 50-50, if you're somewhere near 50%, you should be basically at even units or even plus units, because the way I teach is that you have to incorporate Moneyline dogs. Why? Because Moneyline dogs cash in soccer, they cash in football, they cash in basketball, they cash in NHL, they cash in Major League Baseball. In fact, these last 2 years of Major League Baseball, we were 53% overall and still turned combined, what was that, close to 80 units with both years, 2024 and 23. So when I look at this, and I share this, I think I share this on Instagram as well. So if you're 5-5, or if you're even, and you're in a hole almost 2 units, it's a clear indication you're playing way too much juice. And when you look at this, and if you're listening, I'll read this out. We had 10 plays. And here are the money lines for the plays we had. Minus 122, plus 106, minus 106, minus 122, minus 143, minus 115, minus 122, minus 133, minus 107, minus 125. There is no way you're going to turn a profit playing that heavy of a juice. We're 5-5 minus 1.55 units. Let's say hypothetically, my next 2 soccer wagers, we win. So now we're 7-5, and let's just assume we're going to win a unit. So we would be up plus 0.45 units, 7-5 at 58%. And the question I'll ask is 58% attainable long term? And the answer to that question is no. The majority of handicappers, especially the ones that are extremely accurate, I mean, at best, you're looking at 55% long term, whether it's for a full season or a full season of a particular sport, whether it be baseball, basketball, etc. When you get up close to 60%, that's just not attainable long term. And especially for soccer, considering it's a 3-way line, meaning you have the home team that could win, the draw, or the away side. So 58%, I mean, that's not attainable. So the approach that I'm going to have, and I don't know if I'm necessarily changing the model, but I'm going to change the approach into how we look at this. And let me see if I can pull up this NHL puck line that I was working on. And I don't think I updated this because, all right, I'll go ahead and share this with you on the podcast since you're listening. What we did was we back tested the NHL puck line. You're playing all favorites at home on the puck line if you can get plus 120 or greater money line. And I started tracking this on 10/13. I don't know if I've tracked it the last 2 days. But what's interesting, look at that. It's 18 and 26, right? And let me see what percentage that is. That's probably like maybe a little bit higher than 40%. So that would be 54. 18 divided by 54. Wait, is that right? 18, 26 is 44. My bad. 18 divided by 44. Yep, it's 41%. So you can see that was 41%. The soccer model was 50%. This is 41%, yet up 2.85 units. And why is that? It's because we're playing Moneyline dogs. And there's something you can Google. If you Google Moneyline conversion chart, Jimmy Boyd, another handicapper, has this Moneyline conversion chart posted. And the one we're all familiar with is the 53%. So if you're averaging minus 110 odds and you hit 53%, you're basically even. It's actually technically 52.5. So it's a really good chart to look at. Let's say you're averaging minus 135 odds. You have, just to break even, you have to hit 57.4%. I mean, there's just no way to turn a profit that way. That's why I've talked about like playing, heavy juice. And for me personally, I don't recommend playing anything greater than minus 150. Especially if and a lot of people will argue and say, well, you have to average in, that you're playing dogs. Meaning if you play a minus 180 favorite, you might play a plus 135 dog. Still, that minus 180 wager, just on that specific wager, on a minus 180 wager, you have to hit long-term 64% just to break even. So on all of your, quote, minus 180 wagers, technically you'd probably have to hit closer to 66, 67% on that particular wager to turn a profit long-term. Just not possible, my friend. So again, juice is very important to look at. And again, a better approach, and this is one of the sports betting secrets, is that to play money line dogs. And again, that's going to be my approach with soccer. I'm going to go back and take a look at this model and then figure out a way to incorporate money line dogs. Because again, originally when I started handicapping soccer, let me see here, pull this log back up. When I originally started handicapping soccer, that was what drew me in, was the fact that how many of these money line dogs cash. So you can adopt that with any sport. You take a look at NFL from yesterday. And we talked about this before. Cleveland cashes as a dog. Let's see who else cashed. New England cashed. That was a huge dog. They were plus 7. Arizona cashed. They were plus 5. Philadelphia, that was a money line dog that cashed. Let's see who else we got. Rams cashed last Thursday night as a money line dog. Let's look at NBA from yesterday as well. Okay. Look at Philadelphia, plus 8 to it. Let's do this. Let's just pull up the money lines. Look at Philadelphia, plus 281. That was a winner. Portland at home, plus 207. That was a winner. I picked a good day to look at it. Brooklyn, plus 150. They were plus 296. They win. And then LA Clippers, plus 296. So money line dogs cash every day. Not 100% of the time. But again, going back to the point I made and looking at this, that hockey puck line, playing the puck line, is that, that the accuracy of that model was only 41%. So it had a 41% win rate, but yet it was positive unit-wise. Where you look at the soccer, we were basically 50%, but still minus 1.55 units. So you got to incorporate moneyline dogs into all sports. It will make the sport definitely a hell of a lot easier to handicap. But anyway, that's going to be a wrap for episode 32. Greatly appreciate you guys tuning in. Going to drop a lot of content this week, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Peace.